Hey everybody, I'm Dr. Lee. I'm a physical therapist, and in this video, I'm going to be talking about sciatica and 3 red flag signs that you need to be aware of that mean your sciatica could be getting worse or that urgent care is required. But before we get into that, I'd like to talk a little bit about what sciatica is and what it's not, because a lot of times we'll have people come into the clinic and maybe they've been told that they have sciatica, but when we evaluate them, we find that it's more of a generalized back pain that could be caused by a muscle strain or vertebral joint stiffness. And while these conditions can be very painful, that's not truly what sciatica is. True sciatica refers to any irritation of the sciatic nerve as it runs along its pathway. And so I have this model of the lumbar and sacral spine to help me demonstrate and kind of talk about what that means. So in our lumbar spine, we have 5 vertebral bodies, L1, L2, L3, L4, and L5. The sacral spine is made up of 5 vertebral bodies that are fused together, S1 through S5. Now, in between each one of these vertebral segments, there are nerve roots that exit out and provide motor and sensory function to different parts of our bodies. The sciatic nerve is made up specifically of the L4, L5, S1, S2, and S3 nerve roots. These nerve roots come together, form the sciatic nerve as it runs down the leg and provides that sensory and motor information all the way down to the lower calf and into the feet and toes. And this happens on both sides of the body. So we'll have sciatic nerve on the right side and sciatic nerve on the left side. Now, how does the irritation happen? Well, like I said, that can happen along the nerve root at many different places. And sometimes in the hip and pelvis, there's certain areas and tissues that could cause sciatic pain. But for the purpose of this video, we're going to be staying in the spinal region because that's more commonly an issue causing sciatica, and it's more of a well-known cause of sciatica. So in the spine, we have our intervertebral discs, and these discs provide cushion and force absorption for different movements of the spine. Now, unfortunately, sometimes the material in these discs can bulge out and infringe on the space that this nerve comes out of. And depending on where these bulges are and the severity of these bulges, that's going to affect where your sciatic pain is felt and how bad you feel it. So, location and severity can affect whether you feel your sciatic nerve pain in the buttock, in the posterior thigh, or all the way down to your feet. Now, in physical therapy, we use directional preference or movement bias to determine how that sciatic is being affected. So most people are going to feel a lot better when they flex forward and bend at the waist or bend at the spine. And that opens up that nerve space and allows that nerve to have a little more room to do its job. And so that's why you'll see most people that have had sciatica for a long time, they kind of get stuck in this forward position, and it helps them walk and it helps them, go about their day. Conversely, most people are going to find that straightening up or leaning back closes down that space and makes that nerve pain even worse. So in physical therapy, we actually look for movements that change the pain, make it better, make it worse. That's not a bad thing. That actually helps us to dose and prescribe our exercises to improve spinal mobility and desensitize that sciatic nerve to its range of motion. What you want to look out for, and what our first red flag sign would be, is something called drop foot. So I mentioned that the sciatic nerve provides motor and sensory function to the lower limb. If the severity of the bulge or whatever is causing that impingement on that sciatic nerve is severe enough that it is decreasing your strength in your leg, that is more of a red flag sign. And so sometimes this happens slowly over time, and most people will kind of notice that their balance may be a little bit off, or they're tripping more, or if you go to step up a curb or step up stairs and your foot kind of catches that edge, that's how people start to notice their drop foot. Very rarely is it an overnight thing or suddenly your foot just doesn't work anymore. And if that's the case, that is an obvious referral to an emergency department. But most people are going to experience this coming on over time, and they'll come into the clinic and we'll assess their strength on their feet, and one foot pulls up real strong and holds against force, and the other one may barely pick up against gravity, or sometimes not at all. Again, that is a red flag sign that we're going to be looking at potentially a surgical consult, because you want to get that stimulus off of that nerve root that's causing that weakness. Because if that stays there and gets worse, your weakness could be more long-term or even permanent. So physical therapy can be helpful in those cases, but it may not be the best place to start. Now, our second red flag sign is something called saddle paresthesia. And so if you've ever ridden a horse, or if you can imagine riding a horse on a saddle, your inner thighs and your groin make contact with that saddle. Now, if you're noticing numbness, burning, tingling in that area, in that saddle area, that is another red flag sign. That's concerning because that means both nerves are being affected. So it has to be on both sides of the inner thigh and the groin area. And that's, again, what we call saddle paresthesia. And if you're noticing that, that is another indication that a more serious level of care may be indicated. Red flag number 3 is any change in bowel or bladder function. So if you notice that going to the bathroom becomes different somehow, maybe you don't know when you have to go to the bathroom as reliably, or maybe you've lost control of when you do go to the bathroom, that is a third red flag sign, and that needs to be dealt with much more urgently than physical therapy. So just to review again, first red flag sign, drop foot. Second red flag sign, saddle paresthesias, any numbness in your inner thigh or groin. And third red flag sign, bowel or bladder changes. Those require urgent care and urgent intervention. But if you're not experiencing any of those signs, physical therapy can be a great way to reduce your pain and sometimes fix your sciatica altogether. So as I mentioned earlier, in physical therapy, we look for directional biases. So bending, twisting, turning your spine. If that makes pain worse or better, then we can use those movements to dose and prescribe exercises to improve your mobility. Now, sometimes the pain is so bad that people are having difficulty walking or even getting up out of a chair. And if that's the case, we would prescribe a much lower level exercise, such as a nerve glide or a nerve tensioner exercise. Okay, and so I'm going to demonstrate that now. At home, you would be able to do this by either laying on your bed, or if it's safe enough to get on and off the floor, you can lay onto the floor. But what we're going to be doing here is basically stretching and moving the sciatic nerve through its range of motion. So to do this, you're going to lay onto your back with your knees bent up. Most people are going to find that it is much more comfortable for their knees to be bent up because it helps them put that lumbar in more of that flexed position. Now, let's say I have pain on my right leg. So what I'm going to do is pull my right knee up towards my chest. And sometimes this is enough that you will feel that sciatic nerve stretching, and you'll feel some of that tingling or some of those paresthesias down the leg. So if that's the case, I would say just pull your knee up towards your chest, flex that hip where you're getting sciatic stretching through the backside of that hip. If that's not too terrible for you, a progression would be to extend your knee towards the ceiling. And at this point, I'm getting more of a nerve glide through range of motion. So I'm stretching the sciatic nerve behind the hip, and as I extend my knee, the nerve is stretching behind the knee as well. Now pay attention to what's going on at the toes here, because that's what's important to differentiate between a neural glide and a neural tension. So I'm pointing my toes up towards the ceiling, and that is actually putting the sciatic nerve on slack. It's loosening the sciatic nerve distally down towards the foot. So I'm stretching through the hip, stretching sciatic nerve here. As I extend my knee, I'm stretching sciatic nerve at the back of the knee, the popliteal region, but I'm loosening or slacking the sciatic nerve at the ankle and the foot. And that just glides that nerve through that motion. And we'll have people repeat this in the neighborhood of 8 to 12 times. Sometimes hold for 3 to 5 seconds and just let that nerve kind of glide through its motion. Now, another progression to this exercise would be changing the foot position. So in this case, I'm going to be doing a nerve tensioner, and as I extend my knee, I'm going to be pulling my toes towards my nose. Now I am tensioning or creating tension down the full length of the sciatic nerve path, stretching at the hip, the knee, and the foot and ankle. And you will notice a difference when you do that, especially if you have sciatica. That can be pretty uncomfortable. And that's another note to make, is that when you're doing these exercises, it's okay for it to be uncomfortable, and it's okay for it to feel tense, but it shouldn't be miserable. You're not trying to see how much pain you can possibly take. You're trying to desensitize that nerve to motion and to movement over time. And then one last progression, I would say, if you straighten out your opposite leg here, you'll get a contralateral pull through the hip, and you're kind of stretching that nerve in a little bit different way. So the most advanced nerve tensioner that you can do in this position is opposite leg straight, flex that hip, extend your knee, and dorsiflex your foot, meaning pointing your toes to your nose. And now you are tensioning that nerve and taking it to its fullest range of motion. So you can work with that, and after coming up from there, my neuromobility feels a lot better. Working with that in physical therapy, we would look at that and progress those exercises. We would do things in a standing position, do exercises that resemble more functional activities that may have been made difficult by your sciatica, and help you progress back to where you're feeling better with less pain and more mobility. Hopefully that was helpful. If you have any questions, be sure to leave them in the comments. And if you want to connect with me or my clinic personally, be sure to check out our Instagram links below. Thanks for watching and have a great day.